Have you noticed that your grocery bill seems to be climbing higher every week? Or that filling up your gas tank is taking a bigger bite out of your wallet these days? You're not just seeing things. That, my friends, is the sneaky work of inflation. It's like this silent thief that slowly, but surely, erodes the value of your money. Honestly, dealing with inflation's impact on your savings can be super distressing. It really hits home, especially if you've been working your tail off to build up a secure financial future. I remember when I first started seriously saving, it felt like every dollar I put away was a small victory. But then, bam, you start to see the prices of everyday things creeping up. And get this, here's a stat that blew my mind when I first learned it. Even a seemingly small inflation rate of 3% can reduce the purchasing power of your savings by half in just 24 years. Can you believe that? That's a staggering thought, isn't it? Your hard-earned money, just losing its value over time. But don't despair. We're not going to let that happen to you. In this guide, I'm going to walk you through everything. We will unravel the mystery of how inflation works, how it impacts your savings, and most importantly, what you can do about it. Seriously, we're going to dive deep. You will learn some practical strategies to safeguard your nest egg, making sure that your money retains its value over time. I promise you, this guide might just change the way you look at your finances forever. We'll talk about everything from diversifying your investments to boosting your savings rate, and even how to create a personalized, inflation-resistant financial plan. It might seem a bit overwhelming at first, but trust me, you've got this. And I'm here to help you every step of the way. So, stick around, because what we're about to uncover is crucial for anyone who's serious about protecting their financial future. Understanding inflation. Alright, let's break this down. What exactly is inflation, and why should you care? Think of it this way. Inflation is basically an increase in the cost of goods and services over time. It's like this invisible force that makes everything more expensive. You know how your grandparents might talk about the good old days when a loaf of bread cost a nickel? Yeah, that's inflation at work. It's not that the bread itself is any different, it's just that the value of money has changed. Your dollar just doesn't stretch as far as it used to. What used to be cheap is not so cheap anymore. Now, there are a bunch of reasons why inflation happens. Sometimes it's because there's more demand for stuff than there is supply. Other times, it might be because of disruptions in the supply chain, like what we saw during the pandemic. Remember when it was nearly impossible to find toilet paper or hand sanitizer? That scarcity drove prices through the roof. And sometimes, government policies can play a role, too. For example, if the government prints a lot of money, that can lead to inflation. But here's a key concept to understand: purchasing power. This is a fancy term for how much your money can buy. When inflation goes up, your purchasing power goes down. It's a simple but crucial idea. Think about it: if a gallon of milk used to cost $3 and now it's $4, your dollar isn't buying as much milk as it used to. That, my friends, is a decrease in purchasing power. Now, you might hear economists and news anchors talk about headline inflation and core inflation. What's the difference? Headline inflation is the overall inflation rate, including everything. Core inflation, on the other hand, strips out the volatile stuff like food and energy prices. Why? Because those prices can fluctuate wildly due to things like weather or geopolitical events. By looking at core inflation, we get a better sense of the underlying trend. It's like looking at the big picture without getting distracted by temporary spikes and dips. Another important thing to know is the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. The CPI is basically a basket of goods and services that the government tracks to measure inflation. They look at things like housing, food, transportation, medical care, all the stuff that regular folks spend their money on. The CPI helps us see how prices are changing over time. It is important because it gives us a standardized way to measure inflation and compare it across different periods. But here's the million-dollar question. How does all this seemingly abstract stuff directly affect the money sitting in your savings account? What does it mean for your hard-earned cash? Let's find out in the next section. How inflation erodes your savings. Alright, let's dive into the heart of the matter. This is where it gets a bit scary, but don't worry, I'll also provide you with solutions later. So, how exactly does inflation erode your savings? Let's say you've got $10,000 stashed away in a savings account. You're feeling pretty good about it, right? But here's the thing. If that account is only earning 1% interest and inflation is running at 3%, you're actually losing money in terms of purchasing power. I know, it's a bummer. Let me break down the math for you. After a year, your $10,000 would grow to $10,100 thanks to that 1% interest. Sounds good, right? But because of that 3% inflation, the cost of goods and services has risen. What cost you $10,000 last year now costs you $10,300. So, even though you have more dollars in your account, those dollars can't buy as much as they could before. Your purchasing power has decreased. You've essentially lost $200 in terms of what you can actually buy. And that's just 1 year. Imagine that happening year after year. It adds up fast, doesn't it? This brings us to another important concept, the time value of money. It's a fancy way of saying that money today is worth more than the same amount of money in the future. Why? Because of inflation and also because of the potential to earn interest or returns. Inflation makes your future money less valuable because it erodes its purchasing power over time. This is why financial gurus always stress the importance of investing. You don't want your money just sitting idle. You want it to grow and outpace inflation. Now, here's a hard truth. Keeping too much cash in low-interest savings accounts during inflationary times is a recipe for losing purchasing power. I've seen this happen to so many people. They think they're being safe by keeping their money in a savings account, but in reality, they're slowly but surely losing ground to inflation. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. You're putting money in, but it's leaking out in terms of purchasing power. To really understand what's going on, you need to look at the real interest rate. That's the nominal interest rate, the rate your bank advertises, minus the inflation rate. So, if your savings account is earning 1% and inflation is 3%, your real interest rate is actually minus 2%. That means you're losing 2% of your purchasing power each year. Ouch. That's a tough pill to swallow, but it's the reality. But here's a crucial point to remember. Not all investments are impacted by inflation the same way. Some investments, like stocks and real estate, have historically done a pretty good job of outpacing inflation over the long term. Others, like traditional bonds, can struggle to keep up. This is why diversification is so important, but we'll get to that later. So, are there ways to make your money grow faster than inflation? Can you actually beat this silent savings killer? Absolutely. And that's what we're going to tackle in the next section. I'm going to share some strategies that can help you inflation-proof your nest egg. Get ready to take some notes. 2.0 Experimental Advanced. Lacks access to real-time info and some Gemini features. Alright, let's get into the good stuff. We've talked about the problem, and now it's time for solutions. How can you protect your hard-earned savings from the ravages of inflation? Here are some tried and true strategies that can help. Strategies for protecting your savings from inflation. Okay, this is where we get proactive. It's time to take action and protect those savings. Remember, knowledge is power. But it is not just about knowing, it's about doing. First things first, diversify your investments. I can't stress this enough. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, folks. You want to spread your money across different types of investments. This will help you weather the ups and downs of the market and protect you from inflation. Stocks. Historically, stocks have outperformed inflation over the long term. Now, I know what you're thinking. The stock market can be volatile, right? Absolutely. But over time, stocks have shown a remarkable ability to grow and outpace inflation. There are different kinds of stocks to consider: growth stocks, value stocks, and dividend-paying stocks. Growth stocks are companies that are expected to grow at above-average rates. Think of companies like tech startups. Value stocks, on the other hand, are companies that are undervalued by the market. They might not be as flashy, but they can be a good long-term investment. Dividend-paying stocks are companies that regularly distribute a portion of their profits to shareholders. It's like getting a little bonus just for owning the stock. Real estate. Real estate can be another good hedge against inflation. As prices rise, so do property values and rental income. I remember when I bought my first house. It felt like a huge financial stretch at the time. But you know what? That property has appreciated significantly over the years. Plus, if you have rental property, you can adjust the rent to keep up with inflation. Of course, real estate is not without its own risks. Property values can fluctuate, and being a landlord is not for everyone. Bonds. Bonds can be tricky in an inflationary environment. Traditional bonds, especially long-term ones, can lose value when inflation rises. But there are inflation-indexed bonds, like TIPS, Treasury inflation-protected securities, that are specifically designed to protect against inflation. The principal of a TIPS increases with inflation and decreases with deflation, as measured by the Consumer Price Index. When the security matures, you are paid the adjusted principal or the original principal, whichever is greater. They're not going to make you rich, but they can help preserve your purchasing power. And NBSP. Commodities. Some people like to invest in commodities, like gold or other precious metals, as a hedge against inflation. The idea is that these commodities tend to hold their value, or even increase in value, when inflation is high. I've dabbled a bit in gold, and it can be interesting, but it's not for the faint of heart. Prices can be volatile. Beyond diversifying your investments, you also need to think about increasing your savings rate. The more you save, the better you can offset the effects of inflation. I know, easier said than done, right? But even small changes can make a big difference over time. Try to cut back on unnecessary expenses. Do you really need that daily latte, or could you make coffee at home? Could you brown bag your lunch instead of eating out? Look for ways to trim your spending, and put those extra dollars into savings. Another thing to consider is a high-yield savings account. Now, these accounts probably won't beat inflation, but they usually offer better interest rates than traditional savings accounts. Every little bit helps, right? It's all about maximizing your returns, even on your cash savings. Here's a tip that might sound a bit out there. Invest in yourself. What do I mean by that? I mean enhance your skills and earning potential. The better you are at your job, or the more in demand your skills are, the more likely you are to get raises that outpace inflation. Take some courses, get certifications, or learn a new skill that's in high demand. It's an investment in your human capital, and it can pay off big time in the long run. Remember, your ability to earn money is one of your greatest assets. But remember this, financial planning is not a one-size-fits-all solution. What works for me might not work for you. We all have different circumstances, risk tolerances, and goals. So, how do you figure out what's right for you? That's what we'll tackle in the next section. Creating a personalized inflation-resistant financial plan. Alright, this is where the rubber meets the road. You've learned about inflation, its impact on your savings, and some strategies to combat it. Now, it's time to put it all together and create a personalized plan that fits your unique situation. First things first, you need to understand that everyone's financial journey is different. Your plan is going to look different from mine, and that's okay. The key is tailoring your strategy to your individual circumstances, your risk tolerance, and your goals. There are a lot of factors to consider. Let's start with assessing your risk tolerance. How comfortable are you with market volatility? This is a big one. Some people can stomach the ups and downs of the stock market. They're in it for the long haul and are not fazed by temporary downturns. Others get queasy at the first sign of a market dip. If you're more risk-averse, you might prefer a more conservative investment approach. Maybe you lean more towards bonds or real estate. If you're comfortable with more risk, you might allocate a larger portion of your portfolio to stocks. It's all about finding that sweet spot that lets you sleep at night. Next up, you need to set realistic financial goals. What are you saving for? Retirement? A down payment on a house? Your kids' college education? Knowing your goals is crucial because it will help you determine the appropriate investment strategy. If you're saving for retirement, which is decades away, you can probably afford to take on more risk. You have time to ride out market fluctuations. But if you're saving for a down payment on a house that you want to buy in the next few years, you'll likely want a more conservative approach. You don't want to risk losing a big chunk of your savings right before you need it. Another critical piece of the puzzle is to develop a budget. I know, budgeting can sound like a real drag. But trust me, it's essential. A budget helps you track your income and expenses. It is important because it helps you identify areas where you can save more, and ensures you're living within your means. There are tons of budgeting methods out there. You've got the 50-30-20 rule, the envelope system, zero-based budgeting. The list goes on. Find a method that works for you and stick to it. The important thing is to be mindful of where your money is going. Now, here's a pro tip. Regularly review and adjust your plan. This is not a set it and forget it kind of thing. Inflationary pressures can change, and so can your personal circumstances. Maybe you get a raise, have a child, or change your career goals. Life happens, right? So, it's important to revisit your plan periodically, maybe once a year or whenever a major life event occurs. Make sure your plan still aligns with your goals and risk tolerance, and make adjustments as needed. Finally, and this is a big one, consider seeking professional advice. Look, I'm passionate about this stuff, but I'm not a financial advisor. If you're feeling overwhelmed or unsure about how to proceed, don't be afraid to reach out to a qualified professional. A good financial advisor can provide personalized guidance. They can help you navigate complex investment decisions. This is especially important during times of economic uncertainty. They can also help you create a diversified portfolio that's tailored to your specific needs and goals. Don't let your financial future be dictated by uncertainty. Take the first step today towards protecting your savings. I know this can all seem a bit daunting at first, but I promise it's worth it. By taking control of your finances and creating a solid plan, you're setting yourself up for a more secure and prosperous future. Conclusion. Alright, folks, we've reached the end of our journey together. And what a journey it's been. We've delved into the intricacies of inflation, uncovered its sneaky impact on your savings, and explored a range of strategies to protect your financial future. Here's the bottom line. Inflation is a powerful force, but it's not one you're powerless against. I want you to remember that. It is something that you can manage. By understanding its impact and implementing smart strategies, you can protect your savings and secure your financial future. This journey has been about more than just numbers. It's about empowering you to take control of your financial destiny. Remember, the key is to stay informed, be proactive, and adapt to changing economic conditions. That is super important. Don't let inflation rob you of your dreams. I've seen too many people work hard their whole lives only to see their savings eroded by rising prices. It's heartbreaking, but it doesn't have to be that way. Take action today to safeguard your hard-earned money. Whether it's diversifying your investments, boosting your savings rate, or seeking professional advice, every step you take makes a difference. You'll be well on your way to achieving your financial goals, even in the face of rising prices. Now go forth and conquer your financial future. You got this. I'm here cheering you on every step of the way. And remember, the best time to start is now. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Take that first step today, no matter how small it may seem. Your future self will thank you.